Today is a pretty big day in the history of podcasting. And as somebody who has been podcasting for 16 years, I'm surprised at how conflicted I feel about it. Because part of me feels like this should be a day to celebrate that this medium that I love so much, that I have given so much of my life to, has broken through in a really visible way with this very prestigious awards organization recognizing people who make podcasts on the same scale as TV and movies. At the same time, it has me really concerned that this is a moment where the medium is in danger of giving away even more of its essence at a time when its essence is being slowly siphoned away by a number of industrial forces. And so what I wanted to do in this video, which I guess is a video podcast, more on that in a moment, is just try to sort through my feelings about why this moment feels so tense to me. I think the big first thing I wanted to work through is really a question, which is, why are we having the Golden Globes evaluate podcasts? It doesn't really make a lot of sense if you think about it, in my opinion. The type of media that a podcast is, particularly the podcasts that have been nominated for this year's awards, as media, they have almost nothing in common with the television and movies that the rest of the Golden Globe nominations are recognizing. All of the shows that have been nominated for Golden Globes are interview shows, talk shows, with the exception of NPR's Up First, which is a news show. The Golden Globes don't evaluate that kind of programming when it comes to television and movies, which is the other form of media that they celebrate. There are no Golden Globes for Best Talk Show. There are no Golden Globes for Best News or Public Affairs Program. So the idea that shows that are those things would be evaluated alongside, by and large, fictional narratives, I don't see why those things are being placed in the same awards bucket. I understand that TV is a different art than filmmaking in important ways, but fundamentally, in both cases, it is writers, actors, and directors and technical crew trying to tell a made-up story. If anything, in my mind, the only sort of podcast that would really make sense to consider alongside the TV and movie Golden Globes would be audio fiction podcasts, none of which were nominated or even eligible. So at a kind of fundamental level, I'm confused about why we're putting podcasts in the same awards category as TV and movies. I have a hunch about it, and I'll come back to that later. But now let's talk about the shows that were nominated. And I want to say, none of this is to denigrate the shows that were nominated. Those shows were nominated, and we'll talk more about this in a second too, because they are wildly popular. People love them. I have listened to some of them, not all, and enjoyed what I've heard. This is not about trying to say those shows are terrible, they shouldn't have gotten the nominations. That's not what this is about. What this is about for me is there are 6 podcasts that got Golden Globe nominations. 6. Out of only 25 that were even eligible. And so my question is, what are these Golden Globe awards that are going to be, well, this Golden Globe award, because I guess only one of them is going to win. What is that Golden Globe Award recognizing in this winning podcast? Because think about what the Golden Globes are recognizing when it comes to movies and television shows. There are a wide range. Some who like to make fun of the Golden Globes have said too wide of a range of categories that you can win for. You can win for Best Dramatic Film. You can win for Best Musical or Comedy Film. You can win for Best Box Office Success Film. You can win for Best Television, like limited series. You can win for Best Comedy Performance. You can win for Best Dramatic Performance. We slice and dice and parse the types of work that are celebrated in film and television in this whole host of ways. And if anything, podcasting is a more diverse medium than film and television. I'm not saying better medium, but there are news podcasts, there are talk show podcasts, there are traditional interview podcasts. Within that realm of interview podcasts, there are serious interview podcasts, there are comedic riff-driven podcasts where it's just like friends hanging out talking. There are shows of that type where everyone involved is famous. There are shows of that type where famous in a traditional way, as in part of the movie and television world. There are podcasts of that type where nobody is famous in that traditional way, and yet those shows are very popular and or really good. There's audio fiction podcasts. And of course, the big elephant in the room here, to my mind, is there is long-form narrative nonfiction, whether it's one-off episodes like This American Life or something like that. And I realize this is what the Up First nomination is probably designed to nod towards, but I love NPR. Up First is hardly the exemplar of this type of storytelling. This American Life would be an example. In the Dark would be an example. Serial would be an example. We could make lists all day of the long-form narrative nonfiction shows that have really defined a certain kind of podcasting that aren't even being taken into consideration here when we're supposedly awarding the best achievement in podcasting. That's a huge missed opportunity. And clearly, the Golden Globes are capable, as an organization, of drilling down at a pretty granular level in terms of different kinds of creative aims when it comes to making things. So the fact that that effort was not made when it comes to podcasting, it's just really unfortunate, and to me discredits the ultimate value of the statue for whichever of these shows gets it. Now, let's come to what exactly is being honored in the show that ultimately wins. For one thing, it's strange to me that, there's a lot of talk in Golden Globe circles around film and television about so-called category fraud. You can read blog after blog about whether one battle after another should be, competing, so to speak, in awards season as a drama or as a comedy. When it comes to television, this is a very famous and, in my opinion, exhausting debate when it comes to the show The Bear. Is it a drama or is it a comedy? And are they getting access to awards and accolades by pitching themselves for awards purposes as a comedy when in fact it's actually a very dramatic show, right? But if you accept that that is a valid conversation to have, the idea there is that it doesn't really make sense to have, if we're talking about TV, a show like The Bear in competition against a show like The Pit, a hospital drama. One is notionally a comedy about working in a kitchen. One is notionally a very intense drama about working in an emergency room. There is this idea that we should compete like things against each other when it comes to these awards, right? So if we look at the podcast nominees, we have these 5 chat shows, and then we have NPR's Up First. We have Amy Poehler going up against Steve Inskeep. Steve Inskeep is awesome and extremely talented. Amy Poehler is fantastic and extremely talented. They're not playing the same game. The idea of comparing those 2 shows to each other, I don't know what that comparison would be. It's impossible for me to imagine how one would determine which of those 6 shows is better than the other ones. It would make more sense if Up First wasn't in there, because then it would be 5 celebrity-driven chat shows competing against each other. And okay, I guess that is a debate that you could have. But as I have already said, even in doing that, you're not recognizing the best in podcasting. You're just recognizing the best in one very particular type of podcasting. Let's go a little bit further with this. Ostensibly, when it comes to the Golden Globes and the people who are nominated for the awards in film and television craft, what we are awarding in the work of these artists is performance, direction, storytelling that is singular in some way, that does something for the medium, that is either the execution of that thing in its most ideal form, or it is challenging and surprising. It's doing something that we've never seen another movie do. In One Battle After Another, there has been so much made of the car chase scene at the end and how it's this tense combination of high-stakes action filmmaking and Looney Tunes, but it's live action, and the pace of it is really slow, but the urgency is really high. Whether or not you agree that One Battle After Another is a good movie, there is this debate, right, about is it doing something that we haven't seen before? And there are examples of this in all of the other nominees in film and television. In podcasting, there were a bunch of moments this year that, in my opinion, really changed the game in terms of what the medium is doing and can offer going forward. And by just nominating these 6 shows as shows, all of which are produced on an ongoing basis, which means there's multiple new episodes every week. The format of them is more or less the same every time. Neither of them, and this is not a slam on any of them, is doing anything particularly innovative with the format. In the chat shows, it's just people sitting there talking to each other. Up First is, NPR doing a thing that NPR invented when it comes to a daily news magazine. It's not like they're really pushing the limits on what is possible in the medium. And if the idea behind these awards is best achievement in acting in a comedy, acting in a drama, direction of a certain kind of direction of a television show, direction of a motion picture, shouldn't that same logic apply to the podcast category? And in that case, again, I think it's such a shame and a missed opportunity to not be recognizing just a couple of examples off the top of my head. Even if you don't want to stray too far from the type of programming that's being recognized here, and this is just opinion on my part, but I'm going to stand by these opinions. If you think about the impact, not just on podcasting as a medium, but on this country, that Donald Trump going on the podcasts of a variety of comedians had in the last year of podcasting, it is seismic. We are so far beyond the implications of Barack Obama going on WTF or Hillary Clinton going on another round, or even Cory Booker starting his own podcast, Ted Cruz starting his own podcast. We have ascended to this other level where making a stop on a podcast like that is now something that a serious candidate for public office has to do in order to communicate. And beyond that, I'm thinking specifically of the moment where Trump went on Theo Von's podcast. And whatever you think of Theo Von, whatever you think of Donald Trump, that episode of Theo Von's show humanized Trump in this way that I think has a lot to do with why he is the president again. Theo Von got him talking about his brother, who, as has been somewhat documented, suffered from alcoholism. Trump never talks about his brother. He never talks about it. He barely talks about his family at all. And all of a sudden, Theo Von had him going on and on about how cool Trump thought it was that his brother was a pilot and how great his life could have been if he didn't have this demon of alcoholism. And Theo Von is just right there nodding along like he's talking to a friend of his who's opening up about his own brother's struggle with alcoholism. Take your own political leanings out of it. The fact that Theo Von got someone as impenetrable, as performative as Donald Trump to converse in that way, to just talk like a person, and considering the fact that it was Donald Trump, who wasn't just running for president, but was running for president as a convicted felon and someone who had fallen from grace, that was a big moment in podcasting. And the idea that a moment like that is not reflected in these nominations makes me go, like, what are we doing here? I'll give you another example, because it doesn't just have to be Donald Trump going on podcasts. What Pablo Torre is doing on the show Pablo Torre Finds Out is pretty extraordinary. Just recently, he aired an episode where he commissioned a reporter who works at Mother Jones to do this exhaustive investigation of Riley Gaines, the conservative commentator who is largely responsible for a lot of the anti-trans rhetoric in this country right now. This episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out basically exposes Riley Gaines as a massive grifter and a hypocrite. It's an extraordinary piece of original journalism, but it is delivered in a conversational way. It's Pablo and this other journalist sitting across the table talking to each other. They throw to clips sometimes. They're moving through it in a narrative way, but it's this fascinating hybrid of the talk and investigative documentary formats. It's original reporting that is entirely consequential and generated tons of controversy. Riley Gaines is furious about this episode. That is a big moment in podcasting. I should also say the other thing, Pablo is doing all of this on video. He is bringing together traditional audio podcasting with video podcasting, which is a topic of great debate and controversy at the moment. These are achievements that, if the Golden Globes in podcasting should be about recognizing, it should be about recognizing those moments. I want to cite just one more. The Adam Friedland Show, which, again, is a controversial show for some people, but it's a talk show. It's a sort of a spoof of the interview show format at the same time as it is also a very earnest interview show hosted by this guy, Adam Friedland, who I think is a great example of somebody who is very well known in podcast and, left-wing media circles, but is not a celebrity by any traditional measure. And yet he has extraordinarily famous people on his show all the time. He had Alec Baldwin on this week. had William H. Macy on a while back. The moment I want to talk about is when he had Congressman Richie Torres from New York on in the midst of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. And Adam Friedland is a self-identified Jewish person. And Richie Torres is staunchly pro-Israel. Adam Friedland is very much against Israel's behavior in that conflict. And Adam Friedland usually is doing a sort of like ironic shtick as an interviewer. You know, he's kind of ribbing the guest a little bit. He's very well prepared. He's a good interviewer, but he's also always sort of trying to knock them off their game a little bit. In this episode, in this one particular moment, he does not do that. He cannot get Richie Torres to understand why he has this skepticism towards Israel's behavior in the war. And he starts crying. He gets emotional. And he says to Richie something to the effect of like, why can't you just talk about this like a human? Like, children are dying over there. And Richie Torres just has this steel demeanor, evinces no emotion whatsoever, goes back to his very strict pro-Israel talking points over and over again. It does not look good for him. It's very revealing. And again, regardless of how you feel about that conflict, it is one of those riveting moments that can only happen in a podcast. These, to me, are the kinds of moments that it would be good if these awards were recognizing or considering, rather than just trying to assess the corpus of a show that is just generally about things that podcasts are generally about. It ought to be about these singular moments in the way that film and television are. Okay. I said I would come back to the question of why we're doing this, why the Golden Globes and podcasts have become these kind of strange bedfellows. And this is just my opinion, and it's conjecture, but I think part of it has to do with the fact that, as I was alluding to a moment ago, and as almost everybody watching this already knows, there is a raging battle right now for, and I say raging in earnest because there's a lot of people who are upset about this. There is a raging battle right now for the soul of what a podcast is. Because for a really long time, a podcast was a piece of audio entertainment. And now, increasingly, there is an expectation, particularly if you're starting a new podcast, but even if you've had one for a while and you want to make sure it stays relevant, you have to do it on video. There's this idea that people want to see their podcasts in addition to listening to them. And there are very grave, I don't want to say grave, that makes it sound too ominous. There are very significant stylistic and content implications for that pressure to make things visual. Because there's a certain kind of intimacy, there's a certain kind of storytelling, there's a certain kind of portability of a show that can only come when something is purely audio. And by making it visual, you are changing the fundamental essence of that thing. I'm not saying that video podcasts are inherently bad, but I am saying they are inherently different than audio podcasts. And I don't think it's a coincidence that podcasting as a medium is getting its first taste of recognition from a major awards body at the moment when it has started to shift into being perhaps primarily a visual medium, when it has become legible to a quote unquote mainstream awards organization in a way that it was not previously. And I think, this is going to sound dramatic, but I think it is a dangerous moment for podcasting, because it is a great thing for podcasting to get the kind of recognition that television and movies get. It's a wonderful thing for this beautiful medium to be evaluated in a serious way, just like we evaluate movies and television in a serious way, as serious contributors to the creative fabric. But if we, as podcasters and audio makers, if we lean too firmly into the embrace of an awarding body that is only recognizing our medium because it has started to make itself slightly more recognizable to the types of work that that awarding body usually grants awards to or evaluates, we're giving away everything that is really special about podcasting and that got it to the level of popularity where the Golden Globes would be interested in paying attention in the first place. And I think it would be a real shame to give any more ground in that way, because we want podcasts to continue to be different than television shows, to be different than movies. That's what's always been great about them, is that they aren't those things. And so I guess that is what I want to say, is that I think this is a moment of warning for podcasters as we think about how to navigate the amount of attention that our medium is now getting. It got obviously a huge burst of attention during the last presidential election cycle. I think these Golden Globe nominations that came out today are going to result in even more attention. And what we do with it as creators of podcasts is going to be critically important to making sure that podcasts stay podcasts.